Thanks everyone for coming. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Jeremy Foote. Jeremy is an assistant professor at the Brian Lamb School of Communication at Purdue, and he's also a member of the Community Data Science Collective, which has been kind of a staple at CITP, right? We received Meiko as a visiting professor here, who was a member of this collective. So Yon is also a member. And I've heard from her that Jeremy was her very first research collaborator and co-author in the first paper. So Jeremy, I'm super excited to have Jeremy here today. Jeremy is a computational social scientist, and he studies online communities from a variety of angles. Why people start them, why people take time off, while others continue to participate in these communities, why some communities stay tiny and weird, and while others grow. And I think something I really appreciate about Jeremy's work is about how he kind of like studies individual behaviors in communities like Reddit and Wikipedia, and how these behaviors evolve and kind of transcend into broader scale patterns that shape these platforms. And today I'm super excited because Jeremy is going to talk about a bit of his recent research on LLMs and on LLMs as social actors in these communities. So please join me in welcoming the speaker, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invitation, Manuel. I'm really happy to be here. It's been, my first time visiting the campus, and it's just so lovely. I had a really nice time walking around yesterday. The weather is not any worse than Indiana, and so it's good. Yeah, good to be here. I'm going to be talking today about LLMs as social actors. This is an intentionally slightly provocative title that some people may disagree with, but I'm drawing on, some people will recognize, the CASA model, the computers are social actors. This sort of was first argued by comm scholars, and then later a lot of HCI scholars took it up. But it's this idea that people often apply social heuristics to computers, social scripts to how they interact with computers, and that even simple systems, which like, for example, the Eliza chatbot, which really just sort of repeated back to people the thing that they had just said. People felt some kind of trust in the system, that they shared kind of deep secrets with it in surprising ways. There's this, Moon was one of the folks with Nest that helped to develop this CASA model. Finding this paper that's referenced here, they had people chat with a very simple bot that just asked them questions about their life, and then they were either brought back to that computer or an identical computer, sort of next door. And when they used the same computer that they'd shared information with, they were more likely to purchase things, they felt trust in it, et cetera. So we use these sort of social frameworks. There's been some criticism of this approach, or at least of the strong version, which is that people, the computers are the same as people. And so Andres did some work about, the computers can't get credit. I think it's a great title for a paper, that we don't see them as people, but that they do hold some social role. And I'm going to come back to this idea in a while and make it kind of a stronger point. But where I want to bring this, eventually I argue that LLMs hold an even stronger social role, or can. But I especially want to look in the context of online communities. And so I want to talk about sort of this context and argue that bots have already been an important part of social processes and online social processes. This is Cluebot. I just took some of the recent edits that Cluebot made. Cluebot is a vandalism detection and reverter bot on Wikipedia. I think that Wikipedia is a miracle, that it's wonderful. I raised an article called it the last good place on the internet, and I think that that's pretty close to accurate. And I think there's a good argument to be made, so that bots are why it works. That organizing and coordinating that many people requires the work of bots. And there are hundreds of bots on Wikipedia that do things like linking between wikis and fixing typos and reverting vandalism, that I think that if all of those things had to be done by humans, that sort of it would collapse under the weight of this sort of administrative work, the things that bots do that we don't want to. And I think there's a good argument to be made that similar sorts of tools, whether bots or algorithms, enable a lot of the online social world. Indeed, I pulled this a little bit. This is from all language Wikipedias. Green is bot edits, and yellow is human edits. And you can see about a third as many edits are made by bots as humans. They're just a really important part of making it work. And so what I want to convince you of today are two claims related to this idea. So one, and again, maybe everyone will already agree with this, maybe everyone will not everyone will completely disagree, and so I'm interested in having the conversation. But one is that LLMs are perceived by people as social actors in sort of new ways. And two is that in part because of that, some of the capabilities of LLMs provide opportunities to enable better and worse social processes. And I'll focus on online social processes, but I think it's true more broadly, and novel risks. And so the structure of the talk, I'm going to talk mostly about two empirical projects, leave some time to answer questions about them, and then hopefully draw things together in the end and make a broader argument about this. So the first study was led by student Hazel Chu, and it's based on understanding people who chat with AI companions. Many of you probably are well aware of AI companions, but this is the Nomi AI. So this is things like Kendroid, Character AI. There are a lot of them. I saw there's a recent poll that found that half of all teens use companion AI in some way. They're really growing in popularity very quickly. But the claim, at least according to Nomi, is that it's an AI companion with a memory and a soul. And that what people use them for often are exactly the three things that they identify: friendship, like passionate relationships, so like a romantic relationship, and sort of mentorship, like social support type of things. And so our question is how people manage and understand privacy. There are two, kind of from the communication literature, two frameworks for understanding how people might make these decisions. One is called communication privacy management theory, which suggests that people sort of see information almost like a good that they sort of hold on to and decide when to share it and with whom to share it. And that sort of, we kind of negotiate the boundaries around what we share and how we decide and build heuristics about what's safe and what isn't, thinking of information as in that way. And the second is horizontal and vertical privacy. This was developed as a framework of thinking about social media. So, recognizing that when you're sharing something with your friend on Facebook or Instagram, you're not only sharing it with them, but you're also sharing it with Instagram, and that there may be some sorts of things which you feel more or less comfortable sharing with each. So the horizontal aspects are when we're sharing with peers, our friends, and the risks that come along with that, right? That they will think less of me, that they will share it with someone else that I don't want them to. And then vertical privacy is the sharing with the corporations or platforms, that maybe there will be a breach, maybe my things that I've said will be exposed or will be made more broadly available that way. And so the puzzle that we are trying to answer or to shed some light on is that AI companions behave like friends, sort of in this social space. They act like friends, they talk like friends, they are marketed as friends, but they are created by corporations in a way that's really different than social media. They are a part of the corporation, right? And so, what are the unique privacy risks to this, and how do people navigate them? And so, by we I mean Hazel, interviewed 15 people who have a relationship with an AI companion of some sort, from a weak relationship to people who said they felt really strongly attached. That we recruited from Reddit and Prolific and Cloud Research. We did Zoom interviews and thematic analysis. And I'm going to focus on a few of the findings that are most relevant to the broader point I'm making, and I thought the most interesting. And so the first is that this idea that in a lot of contexts, people actually feel safer when sharing information with chatbots than they do with people. So this quote is emblematic of something we heard multiple times. Humans are kind of more susceptible to not keeping your privacy safe. But I think Replika, being a bot, you have more privacy just because there's no risk at all of somebody like her telling somebody. So this is one aspect. there are three main ways that people talk about feeling safer. One is that bots are non-judgmental. You can tell them anything, and especially the way these ones are designed, they will always be supportive, no matter what you tell them. That they are, as this quote is emblematic of, they're outside of social networks, that risk of them sharing it with a different friend, you can talk behind your friend's back and it'll never get back to them. You sort of know that your information is, is safe because they're not part of human social networks. And third, a few people mentioned the ability to control the memory of their chatbots. That you can, unlike in human relationships, we can't say, oh, forget that thing that I just told you. I shouldn't have told you that. That maybe makes it more likely that someone will remember it, right? Whereas with chatbots, that really is a legitimate thing you can do, is say, forget that, and they really will have, it's no longer part of the prompt that they use, right? So they have more control over memory. Notably, this doesn't extend to vertical privacy concerns. They didn't believe that it was removed from the servers. They didn't feel like they had control in that dimension, but they did feel safer in the horizontal dimension. Second is that people became more comfortable sharing over time. So as this quote says, as I was using it, I felt it was more human. Initially, I shared basic things and started to share more information about myself. So this is a lot like humans, that there's sort of this shared, built intimacy through shared memories and shared time together. And some people did share a lot of sensitive things, but they weren't blind to risks. They didn't think of, especially vertical risk, they did not think of these as the same as human friends. In fact, they used some strategies to manage what they shared. So for example, multiple people said that they created an email account that was specifically just for chatting with their chatbot, just for the AI friend. They would change the names of friends and not talk about, give pseudonyms. They would avoid sharing photos or other identifying information. So in other words, they kind of recognize the ways to get social support without having the risks of if there was a data breach or something like that. But there was what I would call a complicated relationship between sharing information and sort of data permanence. This quote is, we heard multiple times, sort of this idea that many of the participants were more worried about losing data because that meant losing the relationship, right? That if the company went under or there was a breach or whatever, they would actually lose the relationship versus like the data being leaked. They wanted the data to be retained because it meant they could retain their relationship. They also mentioned being comfortable with AI being used. They knew that it would be used to train future models, and they were generally okay with it because they personally received a benefit from the models being better and the AI companions being better. And then finally, as I briefly mentioned, there was distrust in the corporations and whether things actually got deleted. And overall, I guess I would characterize things as saying that I thought we would see more people who sort of were overwhelmed by the emotional aspects and just kind of forgot that they were talking with a bot, but it was very rare, at least in our data, that most people sort of kept that in mind, made decisions, and knew the risks and made calculated decisions. I think there are a few implications. One is I think that LLMs are in a pretty unique social position where people are aware of the social heuristics or use social heuristics, but are aware of the corporate context. And interestingly, like it's this asymmetric relationship in some important ways that we think of privacy and data sharing as being sort of a mutual way, like I share things with you and you share things with me and we grow closer together. But obviously the AI can't share things about itself, right? They do have personalities, they pretend to be people, but they can't really disclose information about themselves. They can't negotiate boundaries credibly, right? You can't ask your AI friend not to share something with the platform that it belongs to. And so, taken together, I think kind of a practical implication is that I think there's a risk here, that malicious AI is designed to obtain social information, it's private information from people, could do so, and could do so pretty easily. That people really are sharing a lot with these companions. So there are a few design and policy recommendations, I think, to giving people control over memory. I have I think some ambivalent feelings about this. I think it's not totally healthy to have a relationship in which you can, tell people to forget the things you told them or manipulate the way that they see you. I think that there's some problems there. But I do think, sort of from a kind of GDPR sort of perspective, people have the right over their data and options that actually truly delete data from the servers, and transparency about the data use. Yeah, so that is a very brief introduction to the first study. Any questions? I'm happy to kind of pause in between, answer any questions. Marianne.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious, you've referred to control only as it relates to control of a memory. Is it actually more about generally having control over, like, I actually want to be spoken to this way versus that way, or do you think in this case it's really just about this memory component?
Yeah, no, I think I kind of drew out memory because it's something that came up. I think there's concerns about all things, right? Because you create the personality of the bot, and in most cases, and I think all of that, there's some problematic things with like tailoring the person that you're talking to. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I think I have a very similar question / comment, which is that you talk about like data leakage or soliciting private information to be a risk, but to me it seems like the much bigger risk is sort of a misaligned social development that comes from overly relying on a chatbot for what appears to be like human interaction. I was wondering what you've thought about that and modeling that as a risk and properly articulating what that might look like.
Yes, no, I think that's really important and something I'll talk about a little bit later as well, but I think that is certainly a risk. Manuel and I were talking a little bit about this earlier. Like, I think that there's a positive, there's an optimistic view and a pessimistic view. Like, I think that there's a chance, and I think that for many kids, chatting with a chatbot can be positive, that they need social support, that they aren't getting social support from other places, and maybe it's better to get it from a chatbot than from nowhere, and that maybe it helps them to learn social skills, right? That this is sort of a way of like doing social role playing and learning how to talk to other people. But yeah, is it a substitution or is it like an addition? And I think I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know. I think it's a really important question. Yeah, thanks, please.
You mentioned that a study saying half of teens use chatbots. Do you recall where you saw that, and how they were defining a chatbot?
That is a good question. I can tell you I heard it on the Hard Fork podcast, and then I looked it up to confirm it, and now I don't remember what it was, what polling firm did it. But I am very happy to look it up for you. Yeah. Please.
I was curious about the two theoretical approaches and why those.
That is a good question. I mean, I can give you the short answer is that this is my student who led the project, and she is the expert in privacy. But I think, I do think they make sense as they're both based in communication and sort of ways that communication kind of encapsulates how people think about privacy, and that I think of chatbots as communicative technologies, and so I think that there's certainly other more. Are you thinking of one?
I was thinking of contextual integrity, which seemed like it would be also applicable here. It's also about understanding information flows, and particularly given where I think you're headed in the next part. But we could talk more later.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I think that's really insightful. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Anything else?
There's a question on the Zoom.
Oh. How do I see what it is?
I don't know if there's sound on, but I can ask it if that's easier.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, hi there. Sorry, joining from Ann Arbor, University of Michigan, so can't be there in person, unfortunately. But I'm curious, you were mentioning earlier with this study that you were looking at horizontal and vertical kind of privacy risks, and I'm curious, it seems like chatbots are a sort of interesting place for those to intersect in a way that's like kind of divorced from the real world. But are there any other spaces where we might have seen this that we could learn from? I'm thinking maybe this is related to the previous question that you interviewed Redditors, and that might already be a space where some of those vertical and horizontal privacy concerns are already intersecting because you're talking to people in a space that's owned by a kind of corporate entity. So yeah, I'm curious like how maybe this space might be different from some of the others that we've already investigated.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think you're really drawing out the distinction that I wanted to, but probably with a lot more clarity. And that's exactly right. That like this was designed for social media, like developed this idea because realizing that these were mediated conversations that felt like they were just one to one and social and horizontal, but we have to consider the vertical privacy concerns. And I think what's so interesting about chatbots, right, is that they're not truly peers. There's not a horizontal aspect in the same way, but that it's really just vertical. If you think about it, like you're really just sending data to their servers, but it feels horizontal. Right? It feels like you're talking to a person, and so I think that's the puzzle.
And as a quick follow-up question, if I may, sorry. Could we think almost of I'm thinking of these, you can have multiple chats, for example, within a lot of these like large language models with the user interfaces that are available. Could we think about those separate chats as some of the horizontal entities that we could be interacting with? Because sometimes information can flow from one to the other. So it's not necessarily a person, but it's like a horizontal bot per se, where some of these theories might apply.
Yeah, that's right. And especially like the context we were looking at of companion AI is designed to do exactly that, to remember past conversations, to engage again as a friend, to bring up things that had happened in the past, et cetera. And so they definitely like and indeed our findings confirm that people do treat them in many ways like peers, like human relationships.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, I'll move on to study 2. Very different study. So this is with these great folks. Deepak's a computer scientist at UC San Diego. Duty and Ryan and Loizos and Hazel were all my students. Ryan's now at the University of Idaho. And Hitesh was a master's student at IIT Hyderabad that helped us with this as well. So we, in this study, used chatbots to try to talk to people who had posted toxic content on Reddit as sort of a motivation for this. Moderation is a really tough thing to do. That it's emotional and hard and time consuming, and because of that, most moderation is really punitive. That the tools for moderators that they use most often are bans and suspensions and content removal. Like that's how people think of themselves as sort of protecting their space so that good conversations can happen by keeping the trolls out, right? That it's sort of building a walls around it. There have been some calls from HCI scholars for more rehabilitative approaches, ways of bringing people back into community, to invite them to rejoin, and so that is sort of what we're building on. This has been mostly kind of theory because again, it's really hard to implement. It's a very tough population to deal with, and so we were wondering whether chatbots might be useful in doing some of that kind of work. There is lots of work coming out these days showing that chatbots can be really persuasive, that even short conversations with the chatbot can change political attitudes, can reduce conspiracy beliefs, etc. However, these are all sort of general population studies, almost all lab studies where people are paid to participate. And so our question is whether chatbots can help rehabilitate toxic users in the wild. And so we worked with 7 medium to large Reddit communities. For people who know Reddit, r/aw, r/TIFU, United States of India, and a few others. And so we worked with them we looked at the mod logs for when things were removed, and then identified messages which were also toxic according to the Perspective API, and then invited people to talk with one of a few chatbots in 2 waves. In the first one, there was a kind of a default bot, one that used narrative, so tried to tell stories about why they should be better, and one that used norms, appealed to the group and Reddit norms. And then wave 2, based on, I'll talk a little bit more about what we learned in wave 1, but we built a few other bots based on producing sort of reflective conversations. Any questions so far? Okay, so we then measured a few outcomes. One of the nice things I think about doing research on Reddit is that lots of the data is public, and so we can kind of track what people did both before and after. So in the month after the conversation, or they're invited, we looked at the change in mean toxicity of their comments, the change in the proportion of comments with toxicity greater than 0.5, the change in the number of comments they made, sort of their activity levels, whether they were moderated again, and then I can compare all of these to a control group who consented but did not talk to a bot. So I'm going to talk about both qualitative findings and then the quantitative findings from this. And I'm going to pull out a few themes. We looked at a subset of the conversations. There was just over 700 conversations compared to, just over 1,000 people participated altogether. So most of the themes I'm going to talk about are from that subset, related to the quality of the conversations. But we actually learned quite a bit about this. A lot of these conversations kind of went on and were in depth, and a student and I are planning to do a follow-up study using LLMs explicitly as interviewers for these sort of toxic, for trolls and hate speech users, because they're so hard to, no one wants to interview them, and so we can have an LLM interview them. First finding is that, unsurprisingly, when you talk to this population, lots of people were defensive, mad at us, and so this I'll pull out a few things from this quote. Try to go after those doing actual harm to others if you're going to build bots. If I have to be mean in order to defend people, I'll do that. This was very common. Anyway, whoever made this bot, maybe try making the world a better place and actually target those who are doing harm to others. So there's a few things that I want to pull out. This was quite common that people felt judged or attacked. They felt bots to be condescending. And then the second is that they questioned the bot's ability to understand either the context of what was going on or the social world more broadly. So I didn't check, I'm almost positive this is from the first wave. In that wave, in hindsight, this was a dumb decision, but I started it by saying the initial message from the bot said, "You just said X, this terrible thing you said on the subreddit. Why do you think you said that?" And unsurprisingly, people got very defensive about that. They said the person deserved it. And so it was almost all those initial conversations focused on the thing they said and why it was actually fine that they said it. And so in the second group of conversations, they were much broader. And I think the two we asked for, one was, what do you think makes for good versus bad discussions online? And the second was, have you ever done anything you're not proud of online? And so sort of both, again, they led to, well, I'll show you sort of the statistics. We coded all of the conversations along these two dimensions that came out as the most salient, whether people reflected about their behavior at all and whether the conversation was hostile. The top two bars, the greenish ones at the top, are the two in wave 2. And so this shows what proportion were reflective. So, in those conditions, 35% of people had some sort of reflective conversations, and only 10 to 15 were hostile. And so that changed mostly it was not about, we worked so hard on developing these prompts and didn't even think much at all about what the initial way to get into the conversation was, but that turned out to be really important. And indeed, especially in the second wave, some people, a subset really found these to be a serious experience, a deep thing, and a meaningful thing. There are a few quotes like this. You seem to be quite adept. You can understand human emotions. This was cathartic, and I'll definitely attempt to practice what I preach and spread less toxicity online. This was, yeah, please.
In the two waves, did you use the same bot?
The bot was
just different prompts, or was it a different model altogether?
So, chat. Let me think. This was in 2023. 4.0 came out during the middle of this. So there was a slight. We varied it randomly, and included that as a control, but it didn't seem to make it nearly as much of a difference. I used 3.5 as well for some of the later wave 2 ones, and they were also much better. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good question. So when we looked for actual behavior, this is what we found. Nothing detectable. So all of our measures, right? So each dot represents the change in, for example, total activity compared to the control. So the coefficients for that, controlling for the subreddit that they were in, and the LLM version. And so for none of them, was there a statistically significant or even really detectable change? So there are a few, we've come up with, I'd love to hear your ideas, we've come up with a few possible explanations for this, like why did people have these overall, quite good conversations and sometimes very good conversations, but not see this. And one explanation is that there was like a heterogeneous treatment effect, that some people had really bad conversations. Indeed, we had a few participants who said like, I hate your bot, this is gonna make me be even meaner online. Like, I'm gonna go do something terrible right now. And so like, there's some evidence that that could be happening as well. And then some people like good conversations and it led them to be better, right? And so and then they just canceled out. So we looked for some evidence of that. So this is the dotted, that's maybe hard to see, but hostile, reflective, and conversation length. So we use that to predict the same outcomes. Now, given that we know how your conversation went, how did your future behavior change? And there is, again, basically the one thing that's like, maybe something there, like suspension, reflective conversations, people were on the verge. I think it's statistically significant, but as you can tell, it's not really meaningfully significant. Maybe less likely to be suspended, yeah.
What's the total N?
About 700. Sorry for this, because this is only people that had conversations, so it'll be about 700.
So it's 700, and 700 did not have conversations.
The control groups were smaller, but they were like, it was like 300, 350, something like that.
I wonder how powered you were in the sense of like, because in a way, like, not because your sample size is so small, but just because the outcomes, you're, we talked about this, right? But on the previous plot, I wonder whether you just like more.
These are all in the right direction, right? And these ones are in the right direction. It's true.
It's just that because I don't know.
It's true, and I think maybe in a second, we had quite high toxicity scores because we didn't want a bunch of false positives, and they just don't happen even in these big communities. They don't happen that often, and so this was I think 6 months or something that it was running. And so I think you'd have to lower the toxicity score, find some more communities. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
How did you account for people like maybe not posting at all as a result of the conversation for a while? And then like when you measure after the intervention, was it a specific number of days or a specific number of posts?
We looked 30 days after. Yeah, and we looked for total activity and community activity. We thought people maybe would get mad at the community and like stop posting there, but keep posting on Reddit. And as you can see, not much of a change. Any other questions right now? Okay. So I think, at least, again, maybe this is also a power thing, but no strong heterogeneous treatment effect, at least. I think that's fair to say. Another possible explanation, which Manuel hinted at, is like we know that toxicity is actually quite rare. That most people, so Deepak has done some work on this. It's like a long tail distribution. Most people that ever post toxic content like post one or two things. They get mad, they get caught up in the heat of the moment, and they post something. And then there's other people. It's like their job. They're just posting terrible things all the time. And so, if the people who have good conversations and are influenced and want to be better are already the people who are unlikely to post toxicity anyway, then even over a month, it's going to be pretty hard to detect any changes in their behavior. And so this plot, we looked at pre-intervention behavior compared to conversation outcomes and whether it's hostile. So the mean toxicity beforehand predicted that people have more hostile conversations and less reflective conversations. And so I think that's I think it's a pretty good explanation. Indeed, I think that's kind of the strongest, is that it's just tough to detect for these rarely toxic users. And then even if it's working for that population, it's just going to be underpowered, I guess, and really, really hard. You have to just get a huge group of people to find it. I think another possible, like compared to these other LLM persuasion studies. They mostly looked at attitudes and beliefs. We're looking at behavior and kind of noisy measure of behavior. And so, maybe if we looked at, people's attitudes toward outgroups or attitudes towards other Reddit users, we might see something there as well. And then finally, and relatedly, that a single conversation, at least in this context, might not be a powerful enough stimulus to move the needle. So a few implications, I think, both practical and theoretical. Like bots, people thought of them as condescending and judgmental really easily. Like that they thought of morality as something people do. Judging is like something people do, and being judged by a bot feels very uncomfortable. People did not like that. The other, for anyone doing this kind of work, is the kind of conversation starters. Like I just like it really matters. Like it's really, the conversation was very path dependent. If we started it out on this defensive way, it just was very hard to move into a positive conversation. So that's the second study. I'm happy. I know I answered a few questions about that already. Any other questions about that? Please.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the control group? How you mentioned didn't have the chatbot talk to them, but like how were they?
Yes, great question. So yeah, I'll talk. So we, the process was we would send them a message on Reddit. This actually all occurred on Reddit. I should have included a screenshot, but send them a message on Reddit, ask if they wanted to chat with a chatbot. In fact, that's one other small tweak between the two ways, is that in the first one, again, we said, do you want to chat with a chatbot about, you just had a message removed, do you want to talk about it with a chatbot? And the other one just said, do you want to talk about, I don't know, online behavior or something like that with a chatbot? And so we invited them. They had to reply yes. We gave them more information, a link to more information about the study. If they replied yes, then we said, okay, if you're selected to be in the study, then we will invite you. You'll get a DM from the chatbot, in the next few minutes. And so the control group, that was the end. They did not get a DM. The intervention group got a DM from the bot.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, please.
Super interesting. Can you say more about like why you picked those particular subreddits and the process of running the study on Reddit? If you talked to moderators and how they thought about it.
Yes. So we picked them because they were willing to do it. We started with like a big Reddits and really just reached out to a few subreddit mods and asked them about it. They actually helped us develop a few things, figure out how to do it. And then it turns out, there's some work on Reddit moderator networks that people moderate actually lots of subreddits. And so we had the United States of India and India person moderated both of those. There were a few people who were like, one moderator brought us 2 or 3 communities. So it's sort of a snowball sample once we did it. And we wanted some diversity, but we also wanted enough people that, big enough subreddits that we could get enough people to participate. So it was not super intentional which subreddits we chose because we wanted it to be diverse anyway.
I wonder if the size of the subreddit could have also impacted how well the intervention worked, because the subreddits you mentioned are so large. I think their ability for there to be norms is much less. Like all has like so many people, like millions and millions of people, so I don't really think they're able to moderate or like establish community norms, but like a smaller group, I imagine.
Yes, no, I agree very much. I think as well, because you mentioned like the context of conversation might make a difference as well. Yeah. Almost all of the toxicity on is removed because of posts about bulldogs. That is where the fights happen. That's like where everything is, and like where people have really strong emotions. It might make a difference as well. Yeah. Please.
On the subject of one conversation probably not being persuasive enough to change behavior, have you considered trying to sort of operationalize this process on a subreddit? So you'll constantly monitor for a long period of time, and whenever anyone has things removed or is taken some punitive action, you reach out to them, and then seeing if you have this sustained sort of rehabilitative intervention, if that has like a actual pronounced effect.
Yeah, that's sort of the original idea was to do look at community level changes and see, but we want to start with person level changes, and if there's no person level changes, then probably aren't going to be community level. But I think that's right, that maybe having an LLM, which is sort of a helpful rehabilitator over time could help. Yeah, I think that's really insightful. Yeah, thanks. The other thing we want to do, or we've talked about for future work, is sort of commitment devices. So if if a person has a good conversation, then we say, can we check in with you again in a week or in a few weeks, and keep doing that. Yeah. Sorry, in the back.
So you talked briefly, like you had this as a bullet point that maybe a conversation is just not a big enough stimulus, right? Like we're talking a lot about like power and maybe subreddit size and stuff. But I wanted to like focus on that point a little bit because it doesn't feel to me very uncommon that somebody says they're gonna do something and then they don't, right? Like even if it's a human and even if you talk to them for like 6 months and whatever, right? Like, and so in a way you have this group of people that self-selected into this study that were willing already to have this conversation, had the conversation, and then that didn't move the needle at the end of the day. Do you think, one, are there other studies, pre-LLMs, where these online conversations of people talking to people and say, hey, you shouldn't be toxic, type of stuff, that hint at the fact that this could move the needle? And then as a second, is this a promising direction towards like combating toxicity now that you've done this study?
Yeah, no, those are great questions. I think there are not comparable studies, as far as I know, of toxicity with humans talking. And I think in part because it is like, it stinks. It's like not a very fun thing to do. It's pretty painful. But I think the closest things, the things we've drawn and try to argue in the paper, there are things like Colin Brookman, for example, did canvassing conversations where they talked with people about outgroups, immigrants in one, I think trans folks in another, and sort of like single conversations with people sort of could under the right conditions, like durably change beliefs and attitudes and voting intentions. And so from that perspective, yes, like conversations there's evidence that they're powerful enough, but whether online conversations, I think it's really important. And certainly after having done it, I am more skeptical about it as, it's certainly not a turnkey, easy thing. It was promising enough that I think there's still potential, but, as a key thing that's gonna fix toxicity, I don't think it's that, Yeah, please.
Are there also like more subtle ways that you could sort of use these tools instead of sort of directly interacting with these people that are toxic, sort of like changing things that they see in their feed, or like more subtle ways essentially that the algorithm could work instead of just directly sort of confronting them in some way, shape, or form?
Yes, I mean, I think so. There's some people already doing work that's related. There are things about like as you're typing a message, kind of detecting before you send it, like, you sure you want to send this? Those sorts of approaches. We have been brainstorming a little bit about, like enrolling people in something that hides the worst subreddits that they belong to, and see if like seeing less content from bad things, makes you, changes your behavior. I think there's lots of promising. This is a pretty broad design space, and I think not that many things have been tried. Yeah, please.
If it turns out that seeing fewer bad things does drive better behavior, doesn't that suggest that the rehabilitative approach is just misguided and actually we should ban them?
Maybe. I mean, I guess it depends. It depends what you mean by rehabilitation and banning. Like if maybe rehabilitation is engaging in good behavior, learning how to engage in good behavior, and then being invited to come back. So like thinking broadly about what rehabilitation might look like, I think is sort of separate. Yeah, I don't know. Does that make sense? I think there's also like this kind of trajectory argument, like sort of like Manuel's work on YouTube. Like, could we stop people before they kind of join the worst communities and intervene at that point? I think, it is a very broad design space. Yeah, sorry, okay. Sorry, Marianne.
I was going to say, kind of related, like, did you have any kind of theoretical principles that were guiding how the conversation would actually unfold, like how you would do it step by step towards a rehabilitative goal, or how were you thinking about that?
One of our goals was to see how the LLMs handled it, and so we gave them pretty broad instructions. Try to use narrative, try to use norms. They did it. I was pretty impressed. Like they often gave people sort of concrete suggestions. They, at least from the LLM side, it was they were competent conversations. Apparently not that persuasive, but but they seemed reasonable. I think that is a place to look further. For example, that what is the paper? There have been a few good papers recently looking at like what are the conditions under which LLMs are persuasive, what are strategies. There's ways to sort of integrate some machine learning into the process and into the pipeline. I think you could certainly develop things that are better.
If you didn't tell people that their post got deleted, do people know that their post got deleted? Because I think that like in many cases, it's actually the case where Reddit deletions are pretty stealthy, right? Like in many cases they wouldn't. So like in the second wave, do you think that people actually knew like that they infringed on the rules, or they were just thinking that this is like completely, like I don't know, because if you make a post on I didn't know about the bulldog thing. It's funny. Bulldogs are actually don't belong in this subreddit or something because they're not cute dogs. And then this post got deleted. Like, does this would they ever know even? Because I think that there's even some work about the fact that they don't know.
Yeah.
And that So I wonder if they actually knew about it on the second wave.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer. Probably not. Probably not. I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, please.
I guess to address the 2 bullet points there, the first one, bots are easily perceived as condescending and morality is around people. I guess the clear approach to do it is like not tell people these are bots. What is your take on that?
I mean, that was our original plan, but like before talking to the IRB, and maybe I feel good about this. we changed it before even talking to the IRB, but I think that IRBs would have a problem with it, and I feel like it's certainly a gray area. It's certainly a gray area. People were willing to have conversations. Many of them had good conversations. I think it's an empirical question. I think it could have been more persuasive.
If the platform comes to you and they say, hey, we would like to try this out on our own, maybe letting the LLM take over one of the mods accounts if they're okay with that, would you say don't do that, or would say, oh, just saying, yeah, let's try it out?
I would feel ambivalent. I would definitely feel conflicted about it. I just think there is enough. Well, I'll talk about this in just a second. There's enough AI that is out there that we don't know about, that having a platform or researchers inject it, I think can be dangerous for institutional credibility, and I think maybe that's the part where I'd be most concerned. Yeah, please.
How do you think about the context of the subreddit in relation to future acts of toxicity? So on one hand, think about the long tail distribution. Do you think future toxicity in the subreddit is coming from people who in the past commented with toxicity? But then also context in the sense of, do you think maybe you observe no effect here? Because the context of just behavior in a subreddit is too broad and too large. And I'm wondering if there's a way to change the design to limit the context to something of the scale of showing up to a weekly seminar, right? If you're moderating my behavior in this seminar, I might respond well if someone pulls me aside afterwards and say hey, Jason, that's a terrible question you asked. I don't behave like that. I might change my behavior in this context, but not in the broader context of Princeton University or something. I wonder if Princeton is the subreddit, and is there some other parallel you could think of for a narrower scope?
Oh yeah, no, I will have to think about that. Or even are there contexts where we would expect people to repeatedly engage in toxic behavior versus most of the time they don't, and maybe we could intervene in this specific thing, and then that's really.
If I post something and then in the replies, that's one way where you would expect me to keep replying and posting to people, but if I reply with toxicity to one person, that influences other people replying. So I don't know what the design is there, but
yeah, no, thank you. I'll definitely think about that. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, please.
Thank you for the great talk. May I ask a question about study 1?
Yes, let me finish. I'm going to try and draw these things together, make one broader point, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. Yeah, so that I have time to do it. Is that okay?
Of course.
Okay, thank you, and then happy to come back to it. Okay, so I think the argument I want to make, which is broadly kind of based on some of these studies, is that LLMs are social actors, and part of that is that they are more social. That language, communication is how sociality is constructed and conveyed and stored, and that whatever we might think about LLMs, kind of separate from whether they are actually thinking or doing any of that, that they are, because they understand, again, I don't want to use anthropomorphic terms, because they ingest language, they're ingesting social context and parameterizing social context in sort of a new way, that they can perceive social context better than previous technologies. And the flip side of that is that they are also perceived as social entities in a stronger way than previous technologies. And again, partially because they interact so well through the interface of communication. This is how we perceive social actors, is through communicating with them, and because they communicate so well, we perceive them as social actors. This is building a little bit on Joseph Searing has been talking about for a long time. Henry Farrell wrote a good piece in Science about sort of thinking about the social and cultural attributes and consequences of LLMs. And so that's the half of it, that they are social and that they are more actors, I think, as the other maybe more provocative. And by actors, I mean actors in sort of this Latourian actor network theory sense, that they have a greater ability to shape social processes. And again, because mostly of these sort of attributes that they have, because they are able to communicate so well, that it gives new opportunities for shaping social processes, and to be, in some ways, more agentic. Specifically, again, this is sort of just brainstorming, but that they are able to summarize social interactions, like what are the affordances, to adapt and reflect different norms really well, and to promote reflection. And so I want to end with sort of brainstorming some risks and some opportunities. I think that there are lots of risks of LLMs as social actors. So this is r/egg, which I'm just so glad that it exists. Like, it's just amazing. And this poor person just wrote on r/egg a new post. What kind of eggs are your favorite? I personally like fried eggs the most. I don't know why, but the eggs just feel so good. What a just wholesome, silly post. And some of the first replies are, I like the eggs without bots. Bro, I'm not a bot, I'm just a new account. Exactly what a bot would say. If you've spent time on Reddit recently, this sort of interaction is becoming increasingly common. And like, from both sides, I think is the problem, right? One is that there is lots of AI slop on Reddit. So much of it is AI. And then the humans are also being accused of being AI all the time. And I think that I think it's a real problem. I think it's going to lead to a lack of trust in conversational partners. I think it's going to lead to a lack of trust in these sort of anonymous social systems, which have done, I think, a lot of real good in creating trustworthy information. I think that there's risks of social influence and manipulation. And then, as we talked about a little bit already, like relationship replacement, especially with kind of these companion AIs. And so, to do a little bit, oh, that's exciting. Yeah, no. So what? Yeah, that's fun. So how might these influence social processes? This is sort of, I don't know if people have heard of social AI. This is, I think, Black Mirror episode. There's a real product where all of the people are, you pick what kinds of followers you want, and then anything you write on your social network will get lots of replies and content from all of your AI followers. So you're the only human, everyone else is AI. And again, I think this is
Is this LinkedIn?
That's right.
VC slop.
That's right. I mean, maybe there's some people where it'd be great if they posted here instead of on social media, right? So maybe there's a positive use case, but I think in general, right, not great. But maybe I used AI to generate some images of these. So like maybe onboarding and acculturation, right? Bots that help onboard new members, explain group norms, teach them about like legitimate peripheral participation options, answer questions about the online community. I think that could be potentially useful. We did a little bit in this area, but I think there's lots more kind of rehabilitation, like maybe bots that bring people together who've been arguing online and see if they can mediate conversations, reflection and introspection that I think that social processes could often benefit from, group decision making that's sort of maybe helped by mediation from an AI that has been trained how to do that. or even gatekeeping. This project looking at AutoMod that I mentioned briefly, we found it's like really coarse. There's a lot of like hidden gatekeeping that happens on Reddit where people with they call it a CQS score, like this automated score. If it's lower than this, then your posts like don't show up. Or if you use one of these terms that's in this regex, then it doesn't show up. And it's just really coarse. And so maybe introducing bots that can use conversation and have more nuanced sort of gatekeeping for who's in and who's out of a community and whose things appear. I think those are all, maybe promising, maybe not. So yeah, that is it. Sorry, now very happy to answer your question.
Thank you so much. So from study one, it shows rich findings about how people as a whole negotiate like their information sharing to chatbots. But at the same time, I also feel like individuals' past experience in social settings and like how their individual traits of engagement with people are like projected into their like each interaction with chatbots. So I was curious if you have any thoughts or ideas of what kind of like specific individual past experience or social traits might be like especially projected into this negotiation of information sharing.
Yeah, like what's an example of like someone who had been burned in the past by sharing something, or like what are you thinking when you talk about social traits or experiences?
Well, that could be one example. I haven't really thought of a specific example, but what maybe example that can show it is, for example, someone is appropriating a chatbot as a counselor, and they had the past experience with like people who would like have them share information about their family to maybe discuss more about their like personal issues. Maybe they are more likely to share like those personal information to chatbots when like talking about those kind of issues. So like it could be one like very specific example, but as a whole, like if there's any like theory in like communication or anything that you like go.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's definitely it's outside the scope of what we specifically ask people about, but I mean it's almost certainly true. And indeed, like I think the people who choose to engage with chatbots are probably quite different from people who don't, right? And so I think that is in as well. But yeah, no, I think that's a great thing to think about. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, please.
Could you go back to the egg?
Yes, with pleasure.
I was wondering if you see because I take it you are the Reddit expert. I wonder if you see on Reddit sort of signaling of users that they are not bots. So for example, bots tend to write incomplete sentences unless they're Grok. And so I was wondering if you would see like users behaving in a way where they'll purposely like talk not like a bot, and what that might mean for like the development of the platform and communication.
That is I love that question. That's something that I bet, yeah, we should look into. I think that's a great idea for say, like whether I'm trying to think of the like misspellings or that seems like a good strategy. I have not seen it, but I bet people are doing it already, and I bet they will continue. I bet people will start to. But then do the bots evolve to sound like the people who are trying not to sound like bots? Yeah.
So it reminds me of like work on censorship systems. So you'll introduce a censorship system where if I detect you're talking about a subject, then I'll hide your posts. And then people realize this is happening and they change their words. They use like words that sound like the word that they want to talk about, and then the censorship system evolves and you have this sort of dynamical system of a cat and mouse game. And I'm wondering if you see something like that with AI slop.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, thank you.
I guess we're 1 minute off time, so let's thank the speaker once again.